so I don't run too long, and we're going to hope this goes well. You ready? All right, let's go. We're going to start this off with the worst game ever. There are 4 pictures here. Guess which ones are schools and which ones are jails. I'm not going to tell you. So fortunately, most schools aren't quite this bad, but the reality is that schools can be dehumanizing places. We are rightfully concerned about things like the achievement gap, but our response to that is to narrow the curriculum, focus only on a couple of things, obsess on testing, and the message our kids get is that there are only a couple of things that matter, and you're not very good at any of them, right? We're really concerned about safety, and so we install metal detectors, we add school police, we instill strict discipline policies, and the message that our kids get is that we don't trust you, right? And for teachers, it's not actually all that much better in a lot of cases. We're so concerned about those factors that we tell teachers your only job is to do a couple of things and to do them obsessively and relentlessly and without any room for the kind of space that is actually necessary to get to know your kids, to see them as human beings, to see them as people who bring talents and interests and goals and aspirations and passions and struggles into the classroom. If a teacher is going to do that work effectively, they need time and space to do it. The more we focus on being remedial, the more we focus on security and obedience and compliance as the markers of a good school, the more we actually demean our teachers. Fortunately, that was the bad part. The good part is things are changing. You've heard about My Ways. You've heard 3 amazing examples about how to reimagine what schools are. The tide, I really do believe, is generally beginning to shift in this direction. And the Innovation Network schools are a great example of this. We are all very different as models, but we all have at our core the idea that agency is really important, that creativity matters a lot, and that ultimately students need to own their own work and their learning. Laura's talk was an amazing example of that, right? And we will never get there if we don't bring that same set of values and ideals to the adults who work in our buildings. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we try and do that at the workshop school. One is that we are a school that is driven by culture much more than by structure. So foundational design principles and values are at the core of everything we do. We go back to those every year to sort of check in with ourselves and make sure we're keeping faith with our values. But we also use them to make big decisions, whether it's talking about how the roster is built or how to reimagine the 11th to 12th grades in our building. These things are really core to our decision-making process itself. The second is that our teachers have a lot of latitude in choosing what they teach. One element of that is that we have this advisory model. It's where all of our project work happens. It runs about 4 hours a day, and it is interdisciplinary. So right out of the gate, you're not limited to teaching science because you're a science teacher. That space is interdisciplinary. We have a project design model that's really, really simple. We ask people to think about what's the purpose of the project. We ask them to think about what students are going to produce along the way and at the end. We ask what big ideas or skills are going to be developed by doing it. And from a planning standpoint, we want folks to be able to come into their classrooms every day with a clear sense of what they want to accomplish, feel comfortable, confident in doing that work. Other than that, there are anchor projects at each grade level, but there's also lots and lots of freedom to develop projects in ways that will connect with kids and connect kids to the real world. Third, the conversation about how to be a good teacher in our school is absolutely and 100% driven by our faculty. A couple of years ago, at the end of the year, a whole bunch of our teachers got together in a room for a couple of days, and they started defining what makes a good, healthy, robust advisory. And from that, and literally over a 2-year period, that conversation has evolved to a self-assessment rubric that we have a study group working on this year that can actually be used to check in about what do we expect to see done well in every classroom. None of that is imposed by leadership. None of that is imposed by the outside. All of that is built up by our teachers, as will the conversation about what happens when someone is struggling, right? That's where this sort of democratic stuff can get really complicated and messy. And then finally, and I think this is super important, especially in the innovation space, it's really important to remember that the model exists to serve great teaching and learning, not the other way around. Sometimes we fall so in love with our ideas that when things struggle, we say, you're doing it wrong. Very often when things are going wrong in the classroom, it's because something about the model isn't working. You have to bring a lot of humility to the work and recognize that when something's not working in the classroom, it's just as often something that we have to do from a model standpoint, not something that's being done wrong at the classroom level. Thank you very much.